If you have been following my channel over the past 2 months, then you will know that I have been playing through World of Warcraft Classic for the first time ever. And well, 12 days of game time and 9 videos later, we are finally level 60. Now, I definitely don't plan to stop making videos on my character Fartinsniff, but I thought that I would edit together all of the videos that I have made so far into one big video. Now, if that's not your thing, then please feel free to watch the playlist that I have made which contains all of the Fartinsniff videos. Anyway, I will stop yapping now. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. World of Warcraft has recently celebrated its 20th anniversary. Happy birthday, World of Warcraft. So with WoW's birthday, we got an absolute load of content in retail WoW, such as the upgraded transmogs, which is cool and all, but World of Warcraft announced something even bigger: the release of WoW Classic Fresh. 3 brand new classic servers which would allow players to play World of Warcraft just like it was in 2004. Now, I have mentioned in quite a few of my previous videos that I'm not the biggest fan of WoW Classic, since I do find it to be a bit slow. I also never got to experience the rush and the hype of the original WoW Classic release in 2019. I also happen to be friends with this guy, who goes by the Leviathan69, or Levy, or Lev. He is a relatively big name in the classic community, being part of the group that got the world first sulphurous Hand of Ragnaros weapon, twitch.tv/the Leviathan69. So what did I say when he asked me to join his guild and play WoW Classic Fresh? Well, I said yes. First things first, we obviously needed to create a character. Now, with the rush of everyone wanting to log right in and get started as soon as possible, I didn't customize my appearance. Just clicked Human Warrior and claimed my name. Before we get started, I would like to say that I am trying to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so any help is appreciated. It costs you nothing and it means the world to me. That is right, Fartinsniff makes his mighty return. He may be dead in the retail universe, but this is classic WoW, and Fartinsniff is yet to write his name in glory. Now, with the rush of the server's opening, I actually forgot to hit record, so that is why we start today's adventure inside of the Jasper Lode mine, on a quest to murder kobolds. And apparently, so is everybody else. Now, this is something I've never experienced within retail WoW. So many different people all rushing to complete the same quests. So many, in fact, that there were up to 5 different people all camping the specific spawn locations for the mobs. So that is exactly what I did as well. Whilst we were fighting kobolds, the boys had managed to scrap together the silver that they needed to form the guild, and we received our invite to the mighty guild Spectrum. The other thing that doesn't really happen in retail WoW is receiving random invites to groups, and I love it. Everyone trying to complete the same quest, so they team up with random players in a cave. But I'm antisocial. After we were finished inside of the mine, we headed back to Goldshire to turn in the quest and then visited the Warrior Trainer, another mechanic that I love and sort of wished still exists in retail WoW. You don't just get handed your abilities, you have to learn them from specific NPCs located around the world, using your hard-earned silver that you've scavenged from random mobs. Then the boys invited me to come and kill Princess with them in order to complete a higher level quest, which would give me some well-needed experience points. And since we were over here, I decided to start completing the quests over to the east of Elwyn Forest, murdering murlocs, wolves, and bears. After questing for a while, it was time for a quick trip to Ironforge, where we visited the weapon trainer so that I could equip an axe that I had inexplicably acquired. And we also visited the first aid trainer so that we could start supplying ourselves with bandages using the linen cloth that we had gathered. I also decided to pick up skinning, as someone in the guild had told me earlier that it was a nice, quick and easy way to earn some gold early on. Once we had completed our errands in Ironforge, we headed back into Elwyn Forest and started working on the Knoll quest, which would be killing Hogger and looting the Knoll armbands. I completed a couple more quests in Elwyn, which got us to level 10, which means I could now start to assign my first talent points. Again, it was a lot different to modern WoW, being able to assign points into multiple specializations, allowing for the ultimate customization. But for my first point, I went with improved rend, which would simply make my rend do 15% more damage. Afterwards, we were starting to run out of quests to do in Elwyn, so naturally, I made my way to the west and into Westfall. Westfall may not be as pretty as Elwyn Forest, but I was excited to quest here as I'd only really ever explored this zone once during my Iron Man challenge videos, and I was looking forward to seeing just how much of a difference there is. And well, first thing is, there's no giant swirly thing in the middle of the zone. We started things off in Westfall with the Pocket Watch quest, a simple delivery quest, and a quest that I still have not done, where we have to collect 8 sacks of oats, and I swear, the oats do not spawn. Unless all the other players keep goblining them off me, then I don't know. Although Westfall was slightly higher level than me, I was able to explore the zone entirely and was making some pretty solid progress. That was until I got to the quest, The People's Militia, a quest where we have to kill 15 Defias pillagers and 15 Defias looters. Now the issue that I have with this quest is that they seem to really only spawn in one area, a tiny strip of land next to a farm plot. So I spent the good part of an hour and a half running up and down this tiny strip of land waiting for the mobs to spawn. And when they did spawn, I then had to try and get a tag on them, and most of the time I wouldn't because there was so many other players trying to do this quest as well. So this is one of the few times that I decided to team up with the random players around me. So thank you Daragon and Maganix for sticking around me for so long. You guys are the real ones. After spending a stupidly long amount of time doing a single quest, I finished up doing what I could in Westfall, as the rest of the quests were still a little too high level for me. And that's when the big man told me to complete all of the quests in Dunmorrow and then Lochmoden, as I would have a much faster progression completing all of the quests that were a level or few below me, which I suppose did make sense. In my head, completing quests that were higher level than myself would award more XP of course, but they took far too long to complete to be a valid method. So I finished up here and headed straight for Dunmorrow. Once we were here in Dunmorrow, I was pretty excited to quest here, as this used to be one of my favourite zones to start back in when I first tried World of Warcraft. I picked up all the quests that I could, and it wouldn't be long for me to notice that spending a few minutes completing a quest is far quicker than spending several hours on them. I really was able to just decimate any mob in my path, which was allowing me to power through tons of quests at once. We killed some gnomes and some trolls, and even explored a frozen cave. There really wasn't that many quests in Dunmorrow worth doing, and that's when I took myself over towards Lochmoden, where we went on a murderous rampage of like 4 quests, all wanting me to kill trogs. And I mean, I'm not against that, because trogs are ugly. As we continued through Lochmoden, we would eventually come to one of my favourite locations in WoW, Felsamar, and accompanying me would be some rather torn up gear. So I quickly found an NPC to repair my gear and headed further into the zone to kill the local wildlife for an NPC to turn them into a blood sausage. And then I spent another 45 minutes inside of a cave killing kobolds and taking their ears, which is pretty normal activity by World of Warcraft standards, I would say. And well, after those few quests, the rest of the quests in Lochmoden were much too high level for me, being level 17 plus, and I was still only level 15. So I headed back to Elwyn Forest and started moving to the east and into Red Ridge Mountains, an area that I've never really explored before. Not in retail and definitely not classic, but I can see where it gets its name. Every rock, red. The path, red. Even the trees and the sky. Truly a very beautiful zone. Sadly though, there wasn't too many quests that I could get done here, but I did what I could, like these 2 quests where we have to find the necklace of a person who dropped it into the lake, and also retrieve the toolbox of a man who also dropped it in the lake. I am not entirely sure how that's possible. In fact, it's probably explained in the quest description, but I don't think I've ever read one of those. There was also a couple of quests that had me killing lots of beasts, which would help me level up my skinning profession, which we were making some pretty good progress on. And of course, back to killing gnolls. Luckily though, these ones had pretty fast spawn timers, so it wasn't too bad. And then, of course, a quest where we need to loot a mob that never spawns. We needed to kill dire condors and get their meat. The issue was they only spawned in a very small area, and they took forever to respawn. And of course there was like 5 to 10 other people all wanting to kill the same mob. So after like an hour, I had finally collected all 5 condor meat, and then still had the other 2 parts of that quest to complete. Afterwards, we were pretty much done with Red Ridge Mountains for now, since all the other quests were around level 20. So I headed back into Lochmoden to complete a couple of quests that I had left there. And whilst doing a Trog kill quest, I unfortunately took a death. And it had already been like 15 hours or so I decided to call it and logged out. So I think I can now officially say that I have experienced at least a very small portion of Classic WoW. What are my opinions on it now? Well, I kinda love it. But what has changed my opinion? Well, it might sound a bit silly, but one of the biggest things that has improved my experience is adding the weapon swing timer. I'm not sure what it is, but I think it's just being able to see how long my final swing is going to take when it's a close call against a mob. Also being able to explore the intricacies of WoW. Things that don't matter in retail WoW are so important in classic WoW. This really did feel like I was playing an MMO. Now, although it is still a lot slower and a lot more relaxed than retail, I can't imagine that making it quicker would make it any better. In fact, I think it would probably make it worse. The other thing that I think when I briefly played before, it felt really dead before, but this time everyone is doing like the same thing and rushing to get ahead of everyone else, and just the feeling of that alone is enough to get you hooked. Last time was my first time playing, and it was all about the exploration and learning the basics of the game. But this time we have ambitions and goals to strive towards, and the goal would be to complete a run of my first ever classic dungeon, the Dead Mines. Logging in for the day, we were at Lochmoden, and we were currently teetering on the edge of level 18. Now, according to my friend Levi, I would want to wait until level 19 until I attempted doing the Dead Mines, so we had a little work to do first. Whilst we were in Lochmoden, we did have a couple of elite quests where we have to basically murder a load of ogres and kill Chalk Soul and take his head, so I joined a group of players to help me on this quest, and we got it done pretty quickly. Afterwards, we were done with Lochmoden, so I would have to find another place to get XP. But first, I headed into Stormwind to list a load of crap on the auction house before heading to Red Ridge Mountains to finish the quest that I didn't complete last time. Now that we were in Red Ridge, we had quite a few quests to keep us busy, and thanks to the elite quests that we did in Lochmoden, we were actually about halfway through level 18. And first up was a good old-fashioned gnoll quest. Kill lots of different types of gnolls and pick up a couple of quest items from them. Luckily this time the spawns were pretty quick for them. The only real issue I had with these quests were the giant groups of gnolls that would spawn around the campfires, but luckily for me, there were a couple of other players also going about doing the quests, and they invited me to join their group. Once we were finished with those couple of quests, I could obviously turn them in, which is what pushed me over into level 19, which means that I was now high enough level to attempt the Dead Mines. So I halted everything else I was doing and headed into Westfall and towards the Dead Mines. Once we were stood outside of the dungeon, I can't lie, I was somewhat nervous. Only because Levi had told me to tank, and I've never tanked before, never in Classic, and never really in Retail either. But I thought, screw it, there really is only one way to learn how. Once we had a full group, we were casually waiting outside for everyone to be here and ready, and then we started making our way towards the dungeon entrance. I at first questioned why we weren't waiting outside the entrance to the dungeon itself, but I quickly realized why. One thing I really liked was that there were a ton of elite mobs to take down before the dungeon itself, almost like a sort of mini quest. Once we were in, we just got stuck right into it and started taking down the hordes of Defias miners and making our way to the first boss, Rakzor. Pulling the first boss, we first worked on taking down the 2 Defias watchmen that spawned alongside Rakzor before taking him down himself. And with that, I can officially say I have defeated my first ever classic dungeon boss. Loot wise, nothing dropped, but that was okay because we still had a ton of other opportunities to make some nice upgrades. upgrades. Moving towards the next boss, I was just trying to take my time as I still had absolutely no idea what I was doing. Moving into a room full of goblins now, I honestly appreciate being told what to do by my little gnome friend, as it not only helped make the run as smooth as possible, but would also give me an idea of what to do in future runs when I maybe don't have someone to guide me through everything. Once we got to the actual boss, we first had to take down this big mechanical thing before the guy inside would pop out, and luckily a really nice two-handed axe dropped, but unfortunately my stupid ass clicked greed, and sadly it was given to the rogue. Moving into another room full of goblins, I was told by my gnome friend to be careful here, and I kind of relied on the other warrior that was with us to throw their knives to pull the mobs towards us. This boss was really no big deal, we just had to take down one other ad around it and then nuke the boss itself. Loot-wise, a very nice ring dropped, which of course I did not win, and then it was back to killing hordes of Defias miners before we would enter the room with the big ship inside of it. We slowly made our way to the next boss across the bridge, killing all of the Defias pirates along the way, and this boss was the first boss so far with any sort of mechanic to it, where he would stun the party twice and then drink something. As for the loot, there really wasn't anything of any significance whatsoever. Now moving on to the hardest part of this entire dungeon, which was in fact not a boss, but it was this spiraling ramp thingy, only because I was told that this area can be quite buggy, and if I wasn't careful, I could end up pulling every mob on the way up, and of course I didn't want that. So I once again just relied on the other warrior to use his little throwing knives to slowly pull each pack of mobs, and with some patience we were able to get through it no problem, which also meant we now have to take on the goblin boss that was patrolling around the top area of the ship. This one also wasn't that big of a deal, and we just simply focused the two ads first and then took the boss down afterwards. As for the loot, the Emberstone staff dropped, which is obviously a very nice pickup for the mage that was with us. Now moving on to the technically last boss of the dungeon, Edwin Van Cleef. This boss was kind of annoying as he does come with two ads, but the difference with these ads is that they would constantly respawn, so really we had to just nuke Edwin until we got him down and then clean up the ads around him. The loot we got from him was the Cape of the Brotherhood, which is obviously another really nice piece for anyone to pick up, but of course I did not win it. Dropping down onto the final boss of the dungeon was Cookie. Literally just a big Murloc with more HP, and luckily for the mage, the wand dropped. This run truly did stack the mage up very nicely, but honestly I was fine with that since he was very helpful in guiding me through the dungeon, so fair enough. And with that, I can officially say that I have completed my first ever WoW Classic dungeon. I got absolutely zero loot, but you know what? It was fun. So fun, in fact, that I literally just turned around and did it again. Only this time, I was playing it a little bit more aggressive as I was starting to feel a bit more confident, but of course being careful in the areas that I needed to be. At the end of this run, I once again walked out with literally nothing, but that's okay because I turned around and did it again. Now, the third one was slightly different as there was a slight altercation between two players, as one of the players had gotten a little greedy and snatched the chest that had spawned and was kicked from the group. But no matter, we continued on as 4, being extra careful this time. The other difference with this run is that I actually went and picked up the quest you get after the escort mission, which would later reward me with a nice piece of gear. Now, when we got to Edwin, we did successfully manage to take him down as 4, and the one piece of gear that I was told to chase, which was the blackened Defias armor, and it did happen to drop, and I think I did audibly gasp as this was my chance to get a serious upgrade, and to my surprise, I did actually win it, and was overjoyed that I could finally leave a dungeon run with a worthy upgrade. And to accompany my newly acquired chest piece, I turned in the quest that I had grabbed and was able to get a nice set of pants. So me, a retail player, has not only taken on my first ever classic dungeon, but has tanked my first ever classic dungeon. So what do I think? Well, it definitely is different. It's far simpler than dungeons are in modern WoW, but it is difficult in its own way. Although I think difficult is a strong word to use, because frankly, neither retail or classic WoW really require any sort of mechanical skill, but it's more so long as you are careful, then you will come out on top. One of the things I do like is that every piece of loot means something. Every time a blue item dropped, I got excited, even if I didn't need it, which is something that is honestly non-existent in modern WoW, at least while leveling anyway. But I am super excited to find out how all of the other classic dungeons compare to how they are in retail. Last time I played WoW Classic, I had only just gotten familiar with the game and the very basics of how everything works, and decided that I would take on my first ever WoW Classic dungeon, and not only take it on, but tank it. Today we have only one goal, and that would be to take on my second ever classic dungeon, and one of my favourite dungeons, the Stormwind Stockades. Starting the day off, we were in the wetlands as a tiny little level 22, and in order for me to run the stockade, I would want to get to around level 26, which means we did have a bit of questing to do first, and what better way to start off than with gnoll killing quest. Honestly, if I had a gold for every gnoll I've killed so far, well then I'd have more than 4 gold. I spent probably around 3 to 4 hours in the wetlands exploring Menethil and doing literally every single quest in the entire zone, such as murdering crocodiles and taking their skin, murdering raptors and taking their skin, murdering even more raptors and taking their skin, murdering murlocs and taking their... Once I had completed the wetlands, I headed back into Stormwind so that I could list all of my garbage onto the auction house, and then headed back into Red Ridge Mountain so that I could finish off a couple of the higher level quests that I had ditched earlier. It was mainly collecting the quest items from the mini bosses that were placed around, like Yowler's Paw, which I got done very easily since there was a little gnome mage who was also waiting for someone to come and do the quest. I also needed to explore a cave and take out a load of orcs, and weirdly enough, I'm pretty sure the layout of this cave is identical to a cave that I explored in Dunmorrow, but maybe that's just me. And lastly, for Red Ridge, I had a couple of elite quests to get finished, so I joined up with a few players that were also there, and we got it done nice and easily. So I had finished Red Ridge Mountains and the wetlands, so I wanted to find a new zone to quest in for a bit, and I had a couple of options. I could head over to Kalimdor and quest there for a while, but I wasn't really in the mood to get surrounded by hordes of troll mages, so I went with Duskwood, a very dark and gloomy place that is clearly going for a type of horror theme, but I kind of like it. I've never been here before. I may have briefly passed through it before, but never spent any sort of substantial time here, so I was quite excited to see what it was all about. Which also meant that there was an absolute boatload of quests to get done throughout the entire zone. Luckily, the mobs were a few levels under me, which meant that I could power through lots of quests at once, like fingering skeletons, killing spiders, killing ghouls and looting their fangs, killing wolves and taking their skin, and after a couple hours spent inside of Duskwood, mobs started to grey out, and that was because I had already reached level 26 and hadn't realised, which means it was time for the Stormwind Stockade. Excited to take on my second ever classic dungeon, I rushed back to Stormwind and logged out for the night. I logged in the next day at a time any well-adjusted member of society would, just as eager as the night before to run some dungeons. One slight issue I had is that I had no idea where to get the quests from. So me and my friend Levi spent a solid 25 minutes trying to figure out where I had left the quest chain, only to find out that it was right in front of me the entire time. I also happened to have just learnt about the group finder feature, which happened to be hidden behind a million add-ons. So using that, I managed to find myself a group to run, and we got stuck right into it.
Masturbation, ejaculation, slinging lots of semen to the masses. Face to face and now we fornicating. Pussy only when I'm busting asses. Meat on his so.
So is that it? Is there more? Have we done everything? Yeah, so in case you couldn't tell from my reaction, I was in fact not impressed by this dungeon whatsoever. I mean, in retail, this dungeon is really cool. I mean, you've got the Lord Inferno guy and the other guy that teleports around the room and it's all cool and everything. But in Classic, the dungeon seems to be pull 16 rooms of identical mobs and then leave. I was expecting it to be at least somewhat similar to the Dead Mines, you know, couple of bosses, maybe get some nice loot upgrades, but nope. None of that. In fact, the footage was so boring that I had to turn it into a little edit, which I hope you enjoyed because the previous 10 segment took me an hour to find the audio for it. So, coming out of the stockades, I did in fact notice that I missed 3 of the quests, which means I've got to go back into the dungeon and collect the quest items. Luckily for me though, I randomly got invited to a group that had a level 43 paladin that was boosting the other players. And I mean, I ain't gonna say no to that now, am I? So we hopped back in and I kind of just stood back and watched this dwarf pull like 4 of the rooms at once. And I did make sure this time to loot every single mob to ensure that I was actually going to be able to complete the quests this time. Let's go! We're gonna turn in all of these quests and never do that again.
What can I do for you? Be careful.
Huge. Bring the seal description of Desert.
Go with honor.
Barros Alexton. So, I've now completed my 2nd ever dungeon in World of Warcraft Classic, and although it may have been the worst dungeon experience I've ever had, not just in World of Warcraft, but in any MMO I've ever played, am I still enjoying WoW Classic? Well, I would say yes. Although it wasn't fun, I do still enjoy the laid-back experience that WoW Classic offers. I enjoyed the first dungeon so much, and I know that the rest of the dungeons are going to be much better, but I do know that the next dungeon is going to be a blast, because it is Black Fathom Deeps. Starting the day off, we were in Ashenvale, patiently waiting to start a Black Fathom Deeps run. I had gathered all the quests that I would need prior, and was ready to start making my way to level 30. Now, I had one goal in mind for today, and that was to get the Whirlwind Axe, a very powerful weapon that would serve me well for many levels. And the only way for me to get that axe would be from a warrior quest at level 30, so we had some XP to gain first. Once we were in the dungeon, we got started right away, killing all of the crabs and murlocs and making our way over the little parkour thingy. Moving on to the first boss, it was of course the turtle boss, and I wasn't sure if I needed to clear out the other little turtles around it first, but we kind of just sent it into the boss anyway, and we got it down no problem. Now in retail, normally you would just skip this second boss since it takes too long to swim under and clear everything, but of course we went and killed it anyway. Now the first big difference in this dungeon between retail and classic is that there's actually a quest giver underneath another area in a sort of hidden cave kind of thingy, and I thought that was really cool. Now the other difference is that in the retail version of this dungeon, there are these giant tentacles that come out of the wall and kind of grab people, but in classic, those apparently aren't a thing. We then headed over to the Murloc boss, and I was trying my best to be careful as to not pull any of the other ones that were scattered throughout the room, and then we took down the boss no problem. And also this orb thing, which I don't think is in retail, provided us with a buff thing. Moving through the dungeon, I read that I was supposed to be careful in this area, so using my little throwing knives, I continued to pull slowly and backwards, until we eventually got to a point where I remembered about the underwater boss, so we hopped into the water and took him down as well. Once we had gotten to the next boss, we once again carefully cleared the room and then took him down too. And another thing that I don't think is in retail is that you've got to clear 4 waves of mobs before progressing, which is pretty cool. And finally, we had to take down the big bad Akumai. Now, I much preferred this boss in Classic, as it's basically just a massive Hydra, whereas in retail, it's literally just a snake head that comes out of the ground. Now that I was done with Black Fathom Deeps, I could of course turn in all of the quests.
Good luck. Light bless you. Go in peace.
Watch, get her back.
And with that done and out of the way, we were now level 28, which means I still had a little bit of XP to gain. So I decided to go back into Duskwood and complete some of the loose higher level quests that I've got there. It really wasn't anything out of the ordinary. We just had to kill a load of skeletons for an item called Rot Blossom, teamed up with a guy to kill 20 plague spreaders, and then went on a larger quest chain of killing more ghouls and skeletons. In total, I think I spent about 2 hours running around Duskwood, and we did get a very solid amount of XP by the time we were finished with it, and we were halfway through level 29. But that also meant I now have to find somewhere else to quest for a bit. So after a not so thorough investigation of my map, I decided to quest inside of Hillsbrad Foothills, since it's a nice grassy plain which would give me a break from the depressing gloominess of Duskwood. I also for some reason decided that this would be the time to start leveling my two-handed swords against my first quest here, that was killing murlocs. And yeah, well, it could have gone a bit better. Once done with that, I was really close to level 30 and wanted to finish it off with a nice simple easy quest to do. Collect 10 turtle meat. How hard could that possibly be? Except for the fact that I ran up and down this stupid river for like an hour and a half trying to get a single piece of meat to drop from these things. I guess I can't complain too much since I was able to take all of their skin, which I would then later sell. Another interesting thing that happened while I was here is that I got attacked for the first time. At least I got attacked by a player who wasn't 25 levels above me. Now, do I have any idea of what was going on in that fight? Absolutely not. But I still won. Shortly after winning my first PvP engagement, we hit level 30. And before we had even completed the quest, but I decided to complete it anyway. So now that I was level 30, I could start the quest chain that would eventually lead to me getting the Whirlwind Axe. First up was the Islander quest, a quest where we had to travel for a while to Ratchet. And once there, we went through a pretty cool arena style quest where we have to take on like 5 different mobs and then take on Big Bill. It was a little tough since we had to kill all of them one after the other consecutively, but we did do it in the end. Next for this quest chain, we had to head back into Hillsbrad in order to pick up another quest which would take us on a little collecting journey. Now for this quest we had 3 objectives. First, we needed to obtain 8 life roots, which I just bought from the auction house. Secondly, we would need to travel into Stranglethorn Vale and take out some trolls for their tusks. And lastly, we would need to turn in a blue quest for the Essence of Exile. And in order to do that, we would need to collect 8 elemental charms. After I had picked up the life root from the auction house, I decided to give the tusk collecting a try. But I was getting ganked over and over and over again. So I thought that it was time for a little backup. After only around 20 minutes, we had managed to collect all of the tusks needed, which meant that I only needed to obtain 8 Thundering Charms, 8 Burning Charms, and 8 Cresting Charms. Now, in order for me to get them, I would need to travel around and kill a load of elementals that were much too high of a level for me. So, yeah, I just bought them from the auction house. I then returned to the cauldron and turned in the quest to get the Essence of the Exile. For the next quest, we needed to take down a big, scary elite mob. Now, Lev previously told me that if I didn't solo it, I wouldn't be getting a raid spot. Little does he know I'm getting a raid spot regardless. So thank you, Sin, for taking down Big Bad Mob for me. And then I could finally turn in the quest and get my precious axe. And not only that, Sin then enchanted the thing for me. Thank you, Sin. Last time we focused on getting the coveted Whirlwind axe, which we managed to get by definitely soloing it and not asking someone from my guild to kill it for me. Now obviously, being a new WoW Classic player, I ask a lot of questions. As I level up, I very often ask what the best way to build threat is, or what the best way to deal damage is, or whatever the question may be. But the answer always seems to come back to one answer: Whirlwind. So that is the goal for today. Unlock Whirlwind and finally be able to deal solid damage instead of just spamming Sunder Armor on every mob that I see. Logging in for the day, we were sitting at a pretty low little level 30 with our quest log loaded up with every single quest ready for Nomergon. Now this was a dungeon I sort of knew was going to be rough, not because of the sheer difficulty, but rather because I didn't know the route. And I knew from experience in retail that this dungeon is huge, and I had never been in 90% of it, since in retail you only target a select few of the bosses. But before we entered, we of course needed to take down TechBot and steal his memory core for the quest. Once we had entered, I was of course familiar with everything so far, but it really only took about 3 mobs before we started moving in a direction that I had never been in before, heading down a strange staircase and picking up even more quests. Now the first boss we took on was actually a familiar one, being the Vicious Fallout, who I believe is still part of the dungeon to this day, and he did drop a pair of blue cloth boots, which of course is not for me, so moving on. We slowly started making our way to the next boss, picking up as many quest items as I possibly could along the way, until we reach Electrocutioner 6000, which did drop a one-handed sword, which I did happen to win the roll on, so that's kinda epic I suppose. And as we were clearing more trash, we accidentally did the Nomergon special, and 15,000 mobs appeared behind us. I'm still not entirely sure what we did to pull them, but it was probably me, and we all died. After coming back to life and clearing up the rest of the trash, we had finally made our way to the last boss of the dungeon, which is of course Megjinir Thermoplug, and we got it down no problem. Did we miss any bosses? Yeah, probably, but to be honest, it was fine, since we were now level 31 and had a gazillion quests to turn in. No better feeling than having 10 quests ready to turn in. And that's also where I decided to log off for the night, since it was starting to get late. When logging in the next day, I had completely forgotten about a very important thing to do at level 30, and that was to get Sweeping Strikes, an absolute must ability for warriors that would stand as one of my primary abilities in AoE situations. So we had done Nomergon, but what now? Well, I asked Lev what the move is, and well, he told me that I could jump straight into Razorfen Crawl. Now, Razorfen Crawl only has 2 quests, and one of them was located in Feralis, and I couldn't find a way to get there efficiently, which meant that I had to run. And I was alright with that, since I knew that I would want to quest in Thousand Needles at some point. Yeah, looking back on this, it was like a straight hour of nothing but running, but we grabbed the needed quest, and it turns out I was missing a few flight paths along the way, and I would have to... And well, it may have taken another 30 minutes, but we were finally standing outside of the dungeon and were ready to go. Now, Razorfen Crawl luckily is a dungeon that I am familiar with. Is it my favourite dungeon? It's like the definition of the word fine. We made our way to the first boss, which was Agem Thorn Curse, and we did do it in one nice big pool. Loot-wise, absolutely nothing dropped, but it was fine since there would be a ton of other opportunities to get some loot. Next was he crossed the room to the next boss, Death Speaker Jargba, and once again we got it down no problem at all. The loot this time was just a crappy cloth green. Thirdly was Overlord Ramtusk, who did drop a 2-handed axe, but of course we don't need that since we got this lovely whirlwind axe. Second to last, we went after Agathelos. Where the hell do they get these names from? Then of course the last boss, which was Chargla Razorflank, who actually did drop his shield. And that was the entire of Razorfen Crawl. And you know what? It wasn't too bad. I had a lot more fun doing it than I had originally thought that I would. And hey, we could now turn in the Feralis quest. My god, I didn't realize how much running I did that day. Well, with that out of the way, we had successfully completed 2 dungeons, and we're now level 32. But that's not enough, since we wouldn't be unlocking Whirlwind until level 36, which means we've got some questing to do. And well, after thinking about it for an entire 13 seconds, I decided to quest for a bit in these Shimmering Flats, since I had never been there before, never in retail or in classic, so I was kind of looking forward to it. Okay, great start. The only downside I experienced whilst I was here is that there were a lot of horde running around that were significantly higher level than me. But looking past that fact, this was honestly a really cool zone to explore, and that might seem stupid since it's literally just a flat plain, but that's what I think made it so cool. I haven't really seen any other zone like this. It's really a perfect mix between being really pretty and having a slight eeriness to it. Anyway, I filled up the quest log with as much as I could to keep me busy for a while, and it was really nothing out of the ordinary. We had to kill a load of basilisks, which was pretty good for leveling up my skinning, and it was the same story with the scorpions. We also had to murder a lot of turtles in order to collect their shells. And lastly, we needed to pick up 30 rocket cart parts. And I mean, it was as simple as it gets. Just walk up to one of the junk piles and pick it up. And usually with this type of quest, there's a severe lack of spawns and you're left searching for hours. But this time they were in such massive abundance. I mean, there was one more quest where we had to kill vultures and take their bones, but I ended up skipping that quest because I couldn't seem to find any of the vultures. And pretty quickly, we had completed everything that there was to do here, which kind of left me in a spot where I was too high of a level for certain areas, but too low for others. So I spent the next 4-ish hours running around random zones collecting loose quests that I had earlier skipped. Like I went over into Stranglethorn Vale for a bit and did a couple quests there, and then over to Hillsbrad Foothills for a while. And after finishing up all of the loose ends, I was sitting at level 34, which meant that I was now high enough to start questing in another zone that I had never been in before, and that was Desolace. Aesthetically, it really wasn't too different from the Shimmering Flats apart from the fact that it has hills, and I quite liked the quests here. There was a fun set of quests where we have to enter into this castle-like thingy that was absolutely swarmed with orcs, and you know, I quite like that. We also had to run around and collect centaur ears because why not, I guess. And there was one of these quests where you have to go looking for a single item that has a very small chance of dropping, and I was very lucky and ended up getting it on the first try, so no complaints there. And I think I lost some of the footage, but at some point I headed to Arathi Highlands and started completing the elite quests that were there with a group that I had found. We needed to kill a couple of mini bosses for their heads, the first one being Marez's head, who we did get down nice and easy. However, when it came to getting Otto's head, we actually died on the first attempt, but after actually using our brains, we did end up killing them by fearing one of them first. It only took around an hour to get all of them completed, and by then we were so close to level 36, and then for some reason I stopped recording. But I was so close, in fact it was a simple case of me exploring a new place to get the XP. Okay, so I'm a retail player, and over the past few weeks I've been playing through WoW Classic for the first time, and well, it sure has been a lot of fun. I started playing from the minute WoW Classic Fresh launched on the 21st of November. Starting out as someone who has never touched the game before was somewhat intimidating, because everyone around me moved around like they had done it before, and they most definitely have. And to be honest, it was that feeling that drove me away from Classic in the past, and I really wasn't expecting it to make it past level 10, but little did I know the adventure I was going to go on over the next few weeks. In my mind, I had already experienced everything that Azeroth had to offer from playing retail, and it wouldn't be until I did my first dungeon in Classic that I realized that this is an entirely new journey inside of the world that I already loved. So many places that I hadn't explored because I had just flown right over top of them. In Classic, you really get this sense of community, right from finding people to run a dungeon with, to members of my guild helping me complete quests, to even you guys giving me gifts in-game. I think that now that we're reaching the halfway point in my journey to level 60, it's safe to say that Classic has grown on me. And well, I can only hope that the rest of my time here is just as enjoyable. In case you haven't watched any of my previous videos, then I would like to introduce you to my character, Fartin Sniff. You know me, I like to set little goals for myself in each video, and today we actually have two. First of all, get to level 40 so that I can unlock my first ever WoW Classic mount. And second is to get to level 42. Why level 42? Well, level 42 actually marks the halfway point. Well, at least in terms of XP anyway. Starting off the day, we were waiting outside of Scarlet Monastery, since last time we managed to unlock the ability Whirlwind, which is one of the best AoE abilities that Warrior has access to, and arguably one of the best in the entire game. So, we're going to put it to some use inside of a dungeon. And besides, I'm starting to get a little tired of just running around completing random quests, and Scarlet Armory would be one of the best ways for me to get some XP right now. Once everyone in my group was ready, we got stuck straight into it. Now, this dungeon isn't exactly an interesting one, since there is only one boss, which is wildly different to the retail version of this dungeon, as retail meshes all of these Scarlet Monastery dungeons into one big dungeon. With that being said, this dungeon is absolutely filled to the brim with elite mobs, which is what makes it so good for gaining XP. Right as you enter, you are greeted with a courtyard that has mobs inside and all around it. After that, we move into the hallways of the dungeon, which are once again absolutely filled with mobs, and that's not a complaint, by the way. Once we did eventually make it to the end of the spiraling hallways, we make it to the one boss of this dungeon, which is Herod. And is that? No way, a boss mechanic! Throughout the past few weeks, I haven't seen a single boss do any sort of mechanic until now, and it is a pretty simple one. He spins around and deals massive AoE damage, and all you have to do is back away from him. Now, the loot that dropped was the Herod Shoulders, which would actually be a massive upgrade for me, and to my surprise, I actually won it. Now, the thrill of getting a big upgrade is unmatched. Anyone who has ever played WoW Classic and even retail WoW knows that. So for the first time in my entire playthrough, I decided to look up the loot pool for this dungeon since I plan to run it quite a few times. And wow, I'm glad that I did. This dungeon only has 4 pieces of gear to get, which are the Herod Shoulders, Raging Berserker's Helm, Scarlet Leggings, and the daddy of them all, Ravager. Every single one of these pieces of gear would be an insanely good upgrade for me, especially the weapon. Now, that kind of left me with 2 choices. A, I do the runs that I need to complete any quests and move on to exploring a new zone, or B, spam the dungeon over and over again until I eventually lose my sanity and collect every single piece of gear that I can from this dungeon. If you chose A, well done, you're a well-adjusted member of society and I'm proud of you. But no, I went with option B. And so began my plunge into insanity. Really? Again? Oh, yes! Please! No! Dude! Robbed me. Okay, that's the 3rd shoulders in 4 runs.
Nice.
Ooh, yes please. Okay. And that's number 4. Ooh, this is it. Yeah, this is it. Let's go, dude. That is big. That is big, big. 8.5 hours. I spent 8.5 hours in the same repetitive dungeon, and we hit level 40. Not a single pair of bloody pants though. I saw the scarlet leggings that one single time and I was robbed of them and never to be seen again. But maybe that just means it wasn't meant to be, and Fart and Sniff would have to continue wearing the same pair of pants that he's been wearing since level 22. But that also means that I can now purchase my first ever WoW classic mount. And well, you might take a glance at my wallet and call me poor, and you'd be right. So I contacted a friend, and we arranged to meet in Menethil Harbour.
Hello.
What an absolute legend. Sin, I can't thank you enough, man. Bro killed Cyclonian for me and buys me my first mount. If you've made it this far into the video, head into the comments and let Sin know that he is an absolute legend. So, we have our horse, but obviously, we still need to learn how to ride him, so off to the logging camp for some reason. Now, obviously, the horse needs a name, and well, I asked the guild a little, and a few people said that I should name him after the drink Bailey's, but Bailey's tastes disgusting, so I decided to call him after my favourite drink. I would like to introduce you to Fart and Sniff's horse, Smirnoff Blue Label Vodka 1 litre. So we are now level 40, and we have our first mount. So what now? Well, I am most definitely never going back to Scarlet Monastery, because if I have to run it one more time, I think I might develop some kind of brain defect. However, there is another dungeon available to me now, and that is Razorfen Downs. A much more engaging dungeon to say the least, and this dungeon would actually give me the chance to get my first pieces of plate gear. The Carapace of Tutankhamun and the Ice Metal Barboot. First up on the list of bosses for this dungeon is Tutankhamun, the boss that holds my oh so dear chest piece, which I didn't get this time around. Secondly, we head over to the massive bone pile to take on the skeleton boss Mordresh the Fire Eye. And he doesn't have any loot that we are interested in, but he did end up dropping a neck piece. Thirdly, we head over to take out Glutton, and same as the last boss, he doesn't drop anything that we are particularly interested in. And lastly, of course, is Animar. And luckily, he did in fact drop the helmet we are after, but yeah, we didn't get that one either. But you know what? It was a fun dungeon, and I decided that I would also obsess over this piece of gear. And it only took around 4 attempts. And now I can officially say that we are halfway to level 60. In case you haven't watched any of my previous videos, then I would like to introduce you to my character, Fart and Sniff. Last time we ran Scarlet Monastery a lot, and well, we managed to get ourselves some pretty nice gear upgrades, and we also got to level 42, which would mark the halfway point to level 60, although some people told me that that information was incorrect, and it was actually level 44, but whatever. The goal for today, well, I want to try and get my first ever piece of pre-base gear, the Black Stone Ring. An absolutely insane piece of gear obtained from the final boss of Maradon. But everyone else also wants this piece of gear, and the drop chance is pretty low, so I'm not too sure if I'm going to be able to get it today. So in order for me to run Maraudin, I would want to wait until I was around level 48. Now at the start of the day, I was only level 44. While I was so close to 45, we might as well say I was level 45. So I decided to run some Zul'Farrak, a dungeon I was familiar with, and I had already picked up all of the quests that I would need, including a very important quest that would reward me with a very useful trinket that simply makes my mount speed 3 times faster, which doesn't sound like much, but 3% is 3%. So I found a group and we got stuck straight into it. You know, ever since I got a hold of the weapon Ravager, it's like my entire playstyle shifted. Usually I'm very impatient with clicking buttons, even when the game has told me 45 times already that I don't have enough rage. But now I'm watching, eagerly waiting for my character to start spinning like my cousin that one time at the local post office. Okay, enough of that. After around 5 minutes of spinning and clearing off the trash mobs, we do eventually make it to the first boss, Theka the Martyr, who doesn't drop any loot except for one of my much needed quest items. Next, we clear a few trash mobs and head around the corner to kill Antu's Soul, who drops the hand of Antu's Soul. And this really isn't a bad weapon. It has a decent ability, which is literally just Thunderclap on a stick, but I didn't win it. Next, we head into the graveyard area, which is a pretty cool part. You've got to open up loads of these graves and a few mobs will pop out, and there are so many of them, which is fine because it awards a good chunk of XP. After killing all of the graveyard mobs, we take on the boss itself, which is Witch Doctor Zumra. And he did drop a pair of gloves, but they're cloth, so not for me. We then move on to the scenario on the stairs where you get swarmed by like 100 mobs, and I thought we might actually have some bother with this, but we were actually perfectly fine. Then on to the last boss of the dungeon. Now the thing about this dungeon is that there aren't too many pieces of gear that I really care about. However, from this boss we do get the chance to get the big bad pauldrons, which would be a pretty big upgrade for me. Now you might be thinking, oh, what about Gazrilla? Well, none of us had the mallet to spawn him, but I still wanted to get it done for the quest so that I can get my carrot on a stick trinket. So after leaving the instance, I went straight back to looking for another group to run the dungeon with. Okay, so I may have forgotten to hit record before starting the dungeon, but really it was all you could expect. We cleared Witch Doctor, and then killed the stair people, and then took down the last boss, and once again, no big bad pauldrons. This time, however, we did have someone in the group with the mallet to spawn Gazrilla. So we cleared up to him and used the mallet to spawn him in, and well yeah, the first attempt didn't quite go to plan, but don't fret, for we respawned and tried again. Only this time we were actually successful.
Have a good one. Alrighty then. You have.
Okay, so we had just turned in all of my quests and claimed my carrot on a stick trinket, which was actually my first ever WoW Classic trinket. Yay. Now, of course, I went back to Zul'Farrak to run it again for more XP, when I came across an interesting group of players. We were 3 warrior DPS and 2 paladin healers. Now, the catch with this is that all 3 of us warriors were wielding the weapon Ravager. And at first, I had no idea what we were doing, but turns out we were doing some kind of XP farm where we would clear all the way up to the graveyard area and then pop like a third of the graves at once and hope and pray that our Ravagers procced. And each run was taking around 11 to 14 minutes a run, so I decided to stick around for a while and grind this XP out. Okay, so I tried my best to make 10 runs of this interesting to watch, but I was defeated. But we ended up doing this for a good hour and a half, and I gained quite a lot of XP. I then got a message from my friend Lev, who offered to take me into Maraudon and boost me to level 48 for free. And I mean, come on, it's free, don't judge me. Okay, so me and the other losers that Lev was boosting were stood in a safe spot at the start of the dungeon, and Lev streamed to me through Discord so that I could see how it's done.
And now for the hard part.
It's about dick, it's about penis. Men are from Mars, but I'm from Venus. Put it in the butt, stick him in the shower, and take what's ours.
I felt. Oh my god, bro.
So once he actually succeeded in completing the run, me and the other boosted losers fight over the loot. Now, me being a skinner, you best believe I stood there for 5 minutes straight skinning every single mob in existence. And of course, we did it again.
I want to drain the main vein, prostate massage so insane until you scream, I'm so motherfucking gay. Women gonna fuck though.
And then a third time.
Masturbation, ejaculation, slinging lots of semen to the masses. Face to face and now we fornicating, pussy only when I'm busting asses.
And on the fourth time, I actually hit level 48, which means that I can now go and do my own marauding runs and try to obtain the Black Stone Ring. However, I stayed for another run because I was just milking it at that point.
Meat on you so thick indeed, when I'm pumping hard, you're gonna scream, mama, don't
Okay, enough of the getting boosted. Now, one thing I actually much prefer in Classic is that the stack sizes aren't in the thousands. There's something so satisfying about seeing 10 stacks of the same item in your bag. I mean, sure, it takes up a bit more space, but that's a price I'm willing to pay. So for my first marauding run, I decided to do a full quest run. So I grabbed every quest possible and patiently waited inside the dungeon for my group to arrive. I was actually somewhat surprised at first, because in retail, marauding is split into 3 separate dungeons, and I never realised that marauding was actually one massive dungeon. First on the list of bosses is of course Noxian, who is a boss who does actually have a mechanic, where he splits himself into 3 smaller elementals. Pretty cool. And of course he did drop his little crappy trinket as expected. Secondly, we move on to doing Razorlash, who really is just a massive living plant, and he dropped a pair of crappy boots. Now in retail, that is where the dungeon would end. Just Noxian, then Razorlash. But we then go through a pathway that I didn't even know existed until now, and it opens up into these areas that I've never seen before. We then move on to killing Vile Tongue and his shadow boys, who drop a little waste piece. We then move into the big open area with the big waterfall, and you know, when you actually take a second to observe the world around you, you start to notice just how amazing certain parts of the game really are. And this room here is so cool looking, I just love it. After clearing up more trash mobs, we once again head down a path that I didn't know existed, to kill a boss that I didn't know existed, who dropped a shield that I didn't need on for some reason, even though that would have come in handy. We actually ended up skipping Landslide on this run, but honestly, I'm okay with that because there's nothing from him that I really care about. And then it was time to kill Princess and get my Black Stone Ring. One and done. Princess was actually a lot harder than I originally thought it would be, because she fears everyone and then lets out a few fart clouds that do insane AoE damage. But, to no one's surprise, I didn't get the ring on the first try. Let's go, dude. Let's freaking go. After I turned in all of the quests that I had, I headed back to obviously run it again, because I was determined that I wouldn't leave this dungeon until I got the ring, even if it took me 50 attempts. Second one, we didn't get it, although a nice pair of legs dropped, which I didn't get. Now, on the third time around, this happened. Oh! Fucking please! Okay. Okay. Please. Come on, baby. Come on. Just give it to me, 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 give it to me. Give it to me. Just give it to me, give it to me. Let's fucking go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Oh, let's go. That's our first bit of pre-base right there. Oh my god. Link it to the guild. Let's go, bro. Now yes, I got the ring, but I decided to go for another just for the XP and to see if I could get the legs as well, when unexpectedly we got a very rare drop. One that I know Lev has been farming for the past few days. Sadly though, it seemed that no one in the group actually needed it, so I imagine it went straight to a vendor, but I was still happy that I got my ring. In case you haven't watched any of my previous videos, then I would like to introduce you to my character, Sniff. Last time, I farmed relentlessly, over and over again, to get the Blackstone ring, and my hard work finally paid off because after a total of 3 runs, I managed to get my Blackstone ring. Today, I want to get ready for the dungeon Blackrock Depths, and maybe even collect 2 of the best pieces of gear for me, the Hand of Justice trinket and the Savage Gladiator chain chest piece. But both of the drop rates are super low, and everybody else wants them, so that might be a little bit ambitious, but there's really only one way to find out if I can get them, and that is to actually run the dungeon. Starting off the day, we were in Searing Gorge completing quests, because we were only level 51, and in order to run Blackrock Depths, I would want to wait until around level 54, so we had a little bit of XP to get first. One of the best feelings in WoW is having a loaded quest log and an entire zone spread out in front of you. And well, this seemed to be a pretty contested area, so I joined up with a couple of players since most of the quests here are kill quests. And most of the quests here are taking place along a small strip of land above the cauldron. We had to kill a load of golems and loot an item off them, kill some dark iron dwarves, and kill lava spiders. And of course getting ganked by 2 rogues at the same time who think they are cool. Now fast forward an hour and a half and I finally realize that I can actually go underneath this area into an underground section with a gazillion dark iron dwarfs inside. And fast forward another hour and the real best feeling in WoW comes along, turning in a load of quests. Now although I was leaving behind a couple of quests that I didn't want to do, I decided to find another place to quest. A place I'd never been before, and I went with Ungoro Crater, because nothing could ever go wrong there, right? Walking into Ungoro for the first time in both Classic and Retail, this place looked amazing. I loved everything about it. The unique plants everywhere, the stream going around the zone, the tall trees covering the sky above you. I loved it. Almost immediately after entering the zone, we have an NPC off to the side who offers us a couple of quests, and obviously I picked them up. I then headed up to the back side of Ungoro where the flight point is to pick up like 6 or 7 more quests, and of course to discover the flight point because I very often forget to do that. And I was excited. So many quests to do in such a beautifully crafted zone. First off, I decided to go and do some of the kill quests by killing the Dimetrodons, since that would also allow me to skin them and make a little bit of gold. I then headed down into the insect area and quickly did the thing there, and then went and killed these pterodax thingies, as well as other random things. And everything was going well, and by that I mean I haven't been ganked yet, when I got a message from a member of my guild, Allah, who offered to take me into Blackrock Depths. Not for XP, no, but to farm Hand of Justice for me. I obviously asked how much he charged, and he said free? Now, putting the words free and Hand of Justice in the same sentence is enough to make any lonely loser shiver in excitement for multiple days, and I'm pretty sure I crossed the Great Sea in record time. The way this would work is I would sit in a corner and play Pokemon on my Nintendo Switch, and Allah would go in and take down the boss. Now, if Hand of Justice didn't drop, then obviously it's his item to take, no questions asked. On run number 1, we got this chest piece. Run number 2 dropped the War Strife leggings. Now, you probably won't believe this, but on run number 3, this happened. Whoa, dude, what? I was fully expecting to be here for a couple hours, at least. 3 runs. Again, 3 runs. I don't know what is up with this 3 runs thing, but hey, I ain't complaining, just keep it coming. Now, that wasn't really part of the plan, but that marks one of the 2 desired items achieved. And now all I had to do was to get extremely lucky and get the Savage Gladiator chain. If I get SGC, I might actually freak out. Now, getting Hand of Justice early is pretty cool and all, but I wouldn't be able to equip it yet since it required level 53, which only made me want to hurry it up and get to level 53 as quick as I possibly could. So instead of going back to Ungoro Crater and finishing the quests there, I decided to go somewhere else, another new place, and I went with Fellwood. And I may have forgotten to hit record, but we started in a cave killing Warpwood moss flayers to pick up blood ambers, which I think have a 100% drop rate unless I just got insanely lucky. And we got that done pretty quickly, even though I did have some competition from a level 60 warlock, but he was pretty cool and left me alone. Mostly. After that, I headed further into Fellwood to kill a load of what I think are bear things that stand on their hind legs, but I really don't know. I continued on questing in the zone, killing elementals, killing the Jade Fire boys, and then back to killing weird bear things. It was all pretty standard World of Warcraft stuff, and I was here for a good 4-ish hours. I did so many quests here, in fact, that the game tried to push me out of Fellwood and into Winterspring, which I decided was just too high of a level for me to enter just yet. And Fellwood became one of the first zones that I actually completed every single quest available. Now, that's where my problems started after that. You see, I seem to have a real habit of going to zones and only completing the quest that I wanted to complete, and that would leave the zone with just a couple of quests to do, and it would also mean I was leaving the zone with less XP than I should. And I've done this with so many different zones that I literally had nowhere else I could quest. I could go to the Plaguelands, but that was still a bit too high of a level for me. So really, I had only one option, and I had to go back and complete the quests that I didn't want to complete before. So I went back to Ungoro Crater and did the 2 or 3 quests there. I went back to Winterspring to try and do some stuff there, but gave up almost immediately. I went back to Searing Gorge for about an hour before I gave up. The point is, I learned my lesson not to do that in future characters. And after running around random zones for 11 hours, yes, not joking, 11 hours, I finally hit level 54, which means it was time for Black Rock Depths. So I found myself a group to run the dungeon with, and I'm not tanking this time because this is actually the first dungeon that I'm completely unfamiliar with. I have never ran this dungeon before, even in retail, so I was pretty excited to see what all the hype was about. Now, my first run, I decided to go with a group that was doing a full run of the dungeon. I know that there were quite a lot of different types of runs for this place, but I wanted to experience the whole thing at least once. First thing I noticed is that this dungeon has quite a lot of skinnable mobs in it, so that's a plus because I can make a little bit of gold along the way. Coming up to our first boss was High Interrogator Gerstan, and this one was actually quite fun since she comes with a big pack of mobs. Loot wise, she only dropped this offhand thingy. As we continued through the dungeon, we got to the second boss, Houndmaster Grebmar, and once again my eyes light up at the sight of dead skinnable mobs because I have to skin everything I see, otherwise something bad will happen. And he ended up dropping us a pair of mail boots. Next we made our way round to Arena, and I didn't actually know at the time that this is where SGC comes from, but big surprise, it didn't drop on the very first run. We then made our way over to Anger, and it was going well for a while, but we did end up dying, but we respawned and then never went back to him. Instead, we went around to Pyromancer Loregrain, who dropped a wand and the fiery enchant recipe. We then went and killed Phineas Darkfire, who gave us a pair of pants, and lastly, we went and killed Lord Incendius, who dropped a wrist piece. So, first run, I would say that this is a very ideal dungeon. We get a very good chunk of XP, and there's plenty of room for gear upgrades. Oh, I sure hope a rogue doesn't pop out of nowhere. It's too predictable. What? So of course I didn't do just one run. On the second arena clear, yeah, obviously we didn't get it. That would be way too soon. Once again, we never went in the direction of Anger, but this time we went to this little isolated room where you have to open up a load of coffers. And when you open up the last one, all of the golems pop out and it turns into this big boss fight, which I thought was pretty cool. And the rest of this run was basically the same with no gear upgrades. I ended up spending the night doing quite a few of these BRD runs. Everything was pretty normal, although I did at some point switch to doing only arena, anger and golem runs. However, on the 4th or 5th run, something very interesting happened. Something I never thought that I would see. Oh! 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 Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh! Oh my, oh god! Okay. 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 Come on. Come on. Holy shit, come on. No! 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 Oh no. That was my one chance. I'm never gonna see that again. I am never gonna see that ever again. Jesus, with that reaction, you would have thought someone had just shot me. Anyway, we made our way over to Anger, and my god, Hand of Justice dropped. That is the golden run of BRD. Depressed, sad, annoyed, all because I didn't get the pixels I wanted. I decided that that was the last run of BRD for me. In case you haven't watched any of my previous videos, then I would like to introduce you to my character, Barton Sniff. Today we have some big plans, because we are currently level 57, almost level 58. So my plan is to play the game for 36 hours straight. Now, to some of the WoW veterans out there, I know that number means probably nothing. I mean, some of the things these guys did back in the day was absolutely insane. Now, you might also be thinking that this could potentially be very unsafe, and you'd be right. And according to Google, after 36 hours of staying awake, you may start to experience hallucinations, which we will talk about later in the video. And in the very unlikely case that you actually care about my well-being, I have to say before we start, I only just turned 20. You know, I'm still young. If I'm gonna do this kind of thing, I might as well do it now before I start to get a little bit creaky. So we're actually starting on hour number 6, because I had been farming Blackrock Depths for 6 hours already today, hoping that I could maybe get the Savage Gladiator chain, which I had already been farming for a solid week, and then I could start properly recording later and maybe go off and do something interesting once I had got it. But nope, here I am a week later, making my way up to Blackrock Depths once again. So why am I so obsessed with this piece of gear? Well, although I've mainly been tanking whilst leveling, I plan to be a Fury DPS once I hit max level, and the Savage Gladiator chain is an absolutely insane piece of gear which will serve me for several months before I can obtain anything better. And the thing that makes farming this even worse is not only the drop rate, but also the rate at which the specific boss spawns is extremely low. We can get it from the boss Gorosh the Dervish, who is part of the Ring of Law boss encounter, which is more commonly called Arena. And in this encounter, you always take on a pack of mobs first, and then you take on one of 6 bosses who each have a chance to spawn, who are Anubshia, Eviscerator, Grizzle, Hedrum the Creeper, Okthor the Breaker, and lastly, Gorosh the Dervish. Now, all the bosses have a relatively reasonable appearance rate, except for one, which is of course Gorosh, who will only appear 10% of the time. Now already that is a pretty low chance, but SGC has only a 6.72% drop rate according to Atlas Loot. Now that makes the chances of getting SGC around 0.67% according to a random Reddit post that I found anyway. And to make things just that little bit worse, it is incredibly hard to find a group of people who only want to run the arena portion of this dungeon. So typically I would have to run with a group that were doing arena, anger, and golem lord runs. Now although that meant it would take a little bit longer for me to actually get my SGC, it also meant that I was still getting some pretty steady XP gains. Hour number 6 very quickly turned into hour number 7, which turned into hour number 8, which turned into hour number 9, then 10, and I wouldn't see a single Gorosh spawn until around the 11th hour, where Gorosh finally spawned. I cannot express the joy I feel when I'm standing in front of those tall gates, eagerly waiting to see what boss it is, and I see that ugly prick Gorosh run out like he's some sort of axe-wielding orc. As we're taking him down, my heart is pounding, knowing that this could be the run. This could be the last run I need in Blackrock Depths. And then we finally take him down, and the drop is Savage Gladiator Grips. My heart sinks every single time that SGC doesn't drop. Even if I lose a roll on it, it encourages me to keep trying. It's also worth noting that I properly started recording at around 6 PM, and we were closing in on the 12 AM mark. And the later it gets, the less people are online running dungeons. So my plan now is to take a little step back from Blackrock Depths and go do some questing, at least until morning when people are back online running dungeons again. And first stop is the Plaguelands. Now this is a zone that is brand new to me. I've never been here in retail or in classic, and it has a very dark and gloomy style to it. You know, lots of skeletons and ghouls and such, but honestly, one of my least favorite, I can't lie. That's not to say that I don't think the zone isn't crafted well, I just don't think it's really my kind of style. I much prefer the zones with lots of trees and plants, you know, little streams and such. There also wasn't that many quests to do here. I first started off with this quest where you have to place a torch at the door of 4 towers, and I think the idea behind this is that you're supposed to kill the big bad skeleton inside of each of them, but if you position yourself just right, you can do it without having to go anywhere near the guy. I then headed inside of this building to pick up another quest from a gnome, and I'm not entirely sure what it is about questing at 3 AM, but people seem to be a lot less hostile. And by that I mean I've not got an undead rogue sticking his dagger up my ass every 30 seconds. I then went and picked up another quest, which is simply kill 8 diseased wolves, which was about as basic as a quest as you can possibly get. I continued questing in the Western Plaguelands for a couple hours, and I even took the time to level up my one-handed sword since I was planning to start dual wielding soon. And whilst I was doing that, we hit level 59, which means there's only one more level until I finally reach level 60 and become one of the cool kids. Good morning, gamers. It is currently 10:50 AM. We're almost 20 hours in. And I can't lie, I think I'm starting to lose it slightly. Also, if you haven't brushed your teeth today, go brush your teeth. I just brushed my teeth and my mouth feels all fresh. I'm fucking losing it, dude. It's only gonna get worse. I'm not very good with staying up for extended periods of time. I mean, I'm a pretty low energetic person. Low energy person as it is. So playing World of Warcraft for 20 hours straight really takes a toll. The time was almost 11 AM, and I had spent the entire night questing in the Plaguelands and Winterspring, and let me tell you now, I was feeling it. Staying up all night is a fairly unique feeling. You feel so fatigued and slightly dizzy, and I couldn't think properly, which seemed to only get worse as the day went on. It's also probably worth noting that I hadn't eaten anything apart from some soup and cheese. However, I was completely off of my tits on caffeine, which seemed to help quite a lot. lot. Looking past all that though, I still had things to complete, and most people would be back online soon ready to grind dungeons, and I could once again start farming my Savage Gladiator chain. But until then, I continued to quest in Winterspring. I actually only did a couple of the ones that I wanted to do, which was the one where you had to run around a frozen lake and pick up fragment shards and kill a few spirits, and then went on a massive Yeti killing spree and skinned them all as we went along. Shortly after, I got bored of questing in Winterspring, as I very often do, and decided it was time to head over and do some quests in the Burning Steppes. Nothing too crazy, I just did the quest where we kill a load of different kinds of ogres across this small rocky mountain. I then went and did the orc kill quest where we just have to kill these orcs and loot 50 of the medallions. I also attempted to do the Broodling Essence quest, but after 30 minutes of searching, I could only find a pathetic 3 of them, so I skipped that one. The time is now 4 PM. And well, my friend Lev has been helping me to get my Savage Gladiator chain by running Black Rock Depths solo for Gorosh spawns. And really, I hadn't heard much from him, but then he messaged me to tell me that he had a Gorosh ID ready to go. So I rushed over to BRD to have yet another attempt at SGC. It's honestly kind of insane that a mage can kite a boss around a room and take him down solo. Once again, my dreams have been crushed. That won't stop me. I may be on the brink of passing out, but again, that wasn't going to stop me. 4 PM went by, 5 PM came and went, 6 PM, 7 PM, hell, even 8 PM, we saw no signs of Gorosh whatsoever. That was until around 9 PM, where once again, Gorosh decided to show me his beautiful face. Oh shit! Come on, baby. Come on. Fuck! Once again, I was left banging my head against a wall. Another hour went by with no signs of Gorosh. That was until Lev once again shot me a message to tell me that he had yet another Gorosh to kill. Come on, baby, come on! Come on, Gorosh. Oh! Oh, dude! Oh, dude! Let me link it, let me link it, let me link it, let me link it. Oh, dude! Finally, I had managed to get my Savage Gladiator chain, and to accompany this feat not long before this, I also hit level 60. This is it right here. This is it, gamers. My last boss till 60. Oh my god. We have done it. We are maximum level for the first time in World of Warcraft Classic. And for the first time ever, I can officially say that I have successfully reached max level in World of Warcraft Classic. Sure, it may have taken me 11.5 days of game time, but it was worth it. So what is next then? Well, there is still one place that Sniff is yet to explore. If you have sat and watched this entire video, please let me know in the comments because you are legendary to me. And if you have been here since the start, then I really do mean it when I say thank you. And thank you to everyone else who watches my videos. You really don't understand just how much it means to me. Now, like I said at the start, I do not plan to stop making videos on my character Sniff. But we are, however, going to branch out a little bit and spice up the videos a bit. You might have noticed that I put up a poll asking which class I should try next. So please go head over there and give your vote because we will be starting a new series on a new class very shortly. I've also got a couple of videos planned that are not based around characters or any storytelling whatsoever. So please, I hope you look forward to those. Anyways, enough yapping. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And I will see you all later.